Rise for the arrival of the Honorable Senate President and the Senators of the Republic.
The 18th session of the Senate, the second regular session of the 19th Congress is hereby called to order. We'll be led in prayer today by distinguished Majority Floor Leader, Senator Joel Villanueva.
Sige po, tayo'y manalangin. Dakilang Diyos, Ama naming sumasalangit, kami po ay nagpapakumbaba at lumalapit sa iyong trono ng biyaya. Humihingi po ng tawad sa anumang pagkakamali, pagkukulang, pagkakasala. Linisin mo po ang aming mga puso at isip ng inyong banal na dugo na nabuho sa krus ng Kalbaryo at hayaan niyo pong maging karapat-dapat kami na lumapit sa iyong paanan. Panginoong Hesus, kami po ay lumalapit upang iyong gabayan, bigyan ng kalakasan, kalusugan, maging katalinuhan mula sa kalangitan upang magampanan namin ang aming mga tungkulin bilang mga kinatawan ng aming mga kababayan mula sa Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao at sa apat na sulok ng daigdig kung saan naroroon ang aming mga kababayang Pilipino. Yakapin mo po ang aming mga kababayan, lalo na ang mga naghihikahos at nahihirapan dala ng bagyo, pagsubok, kahirapan, at tulungan niyo po kami na matulungan namin sila para sa iyong kaluwalhatian at karangalan. Muli, sa iyo po namin ibinabalik ang lahat ng kapurihan, kaluwalhatian at karangalan sa tanging pangalan ng aming Panginoong Hesus. Ang lahat po'y makiisa at magsabing amen.
Amen. Secretary, please call the roll of members.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senator Angara, Senator Binay, Senator Cayetano Alan, Senator Cayetano Pia, Senator De La Rosa, Senator Ejercito, Senator Escudero, Senator Estrada, Senator Gatchalian, Senator Go, Senator Ontiveros, Senator Lapid, Senator Ligarda, Senator Marcos, Senator Padilla, Senator Pimentel, Senator Poe, Senator Revilla, Senator Tolentino, Senator Tulfo, Senator Villanueva, Senator Villar Cynthia, Senator Villar Mark, the Senate President.
With 22 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader?
Yes, Mr. President, before we proceed, we'd like to acknowledge some guests from the gallery, guests of our Senate President and the guests of the Senate, Secretary Gilbert Gibo Chodoro of the Department of National Defense. We
Welcome to your
him.
Senate, our distinguished colleague and my former classmate in the 11th, 12th, and 13th Congress.
Our classmate, Mr.
Our
President.
classmate, yeah.
Guests of this representation and guests of Senator Bong Revilla, Congressman Eddie Bong Plaza from the 2nd District of Agusan del Sur, Congressman Alfred Bascug from the 1st District of Agusan del Sur. We welcome both of them, Your Honors.
To my silingan in Mindanao. Well,
Also guests of Senator
Agusan.
Ligarda, Mayor Noel Villanueva of Concepcion, Tarlac. Guests of Senator Lapid, Mayor Ray Lacoste of Buhi, Camarines Sur. Guests of Senator Tolentino and this representation, Mayor Grace Akain of Initao, Misamis Oriental. Guests of the Senate Ateneo Law School, Block 1G, led by their professor, our very own from the Senate before pala, Mr. President, USEC, now of DOH, Alu Dorotan.
Yes, and DOF.
DOF, sorry.
DOH. Oh, DOH. Ginawa mong doktor si Alu. It's all right. And I believe Mayor Francis Garcia is also here, the city of Balanga. Balanga, Bataan is with us today.
Yes, Mr. President, guest of Senator Pimentel, Mayor Francis Garcia is here with us.
Welcome to your Senate, ladies and gentlemen. I'll ask for a minute suspension so that we can approach our guests and say hello to them for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr.
Particularly
President.
those who want to meet our Secretary of Defense. Session suspended for 1 minute. Session resumed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 17th session, Monday, September 4, 2023, and consider the same as approved. I so move, Mr.
There
President.
be no objection to the motion. Motion is approved.
Mr. President, this juncture, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
There be no objection. We ask Secretary to read the reference of business.
Bills on first reading, Senate number 2431, converting Basilan General Hospital into a tertiary level hospital known as the Basilan Medical Center under the direct supervision of the DOH, increasing its bed capacity, modernizing its services and facilities, and appropriating funds therefore. Senator Padilla.
Committee on Rules.
2433, establishing a Level 3 General Hospital in the Municipality of Bay, Province of Laguna, to be known as the Laguna Regional Hospital under the direct control and supervision of the DOH, appropriating funds therefore. Senator Revilla Jr.
Committee on Rules.
Resolutions. Proposed Senate Resolution 776, urging the Senate Committees on Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality, and on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation into the spate of killings of children and youth, the latest involving 15-year-old John Francis Ompad, and the mounting fear and distrust of law enforcement engendered by unrelenting abuses committed by officers of the PNP. Senator Ontiveros.
Committees on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, Justice and Human Rights.
777, calling for the appropriate committee of the Senate of the Republic of the Philippines to conduct an investigation into the increasing incidence of social media-related hacking, illegal access, and other breaches of cybersecurity. Senator Ontiveros.
To the Committee on Science and Technology and Public Information, Mass Media.
Committee reports. Committee Report 117, jointly by the Committees on Local Government and Electoral Reforms and People's Participation on House Number 5819, introduced by Representative Malapitan, an act dividing Barangay 176, also known as Barangay Bagong Silang, in the city of Caloocan into 6 separate independent barangays, to be known as Barangay 176A, 176B, 176C, 176D, 176E, and 176F, recommending its approval with amendments. Sponsor Senator Ejercito.
To the calendar for ordinary business.
118, jointly by the Committees on Agriculture, Food and Agrarian Reform, Justice and Human Rights, Finance, and Ways and Means, of Senate number 2432, with Senators Ejercito, Lapid, Revilla Jr., Villar C., Villanueva, Ontiveros, Padilla, Tulfo, De La Rosa, and Marcos as authors thereof, an act defining the crimes of agricultural economic sabotage, providing penalties therefore, creating the Anti-Agricultural Economic Sabotage Council, repealing RA 10845 or the Anti-Agricultural Smuggling Act of 2016 for other purposes, recommending its approval in substitution of Senate numbers 1688, 1812, 1891, 1962, 2127, 2205, 2214, 2298, and 2413, taking into consideration proposed Senate Resolutions 206 and House Number 3917, sponsors Senator Villar C.
To the calendar for ordinary business. Majority Leader, I'd just like to also welcome to the Senate, I can see him in the back, Governor Mian Mercado of Southern Leyte. Welcome to your Senate, Governor.
Governor Damian is a friend of this institution, Mr. President, so we welcome him in this August chamber. Mr. President, at this juncture, and with the permission of the body, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2243 under Committee Report number 85. This is the bill on Philippine Salt Industry Development Act. I so move, Mr. President.
There have been no objection. The motion is approved.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that we have closed the period of interpellations and debate, and with the consent of the body, I now move to open the period of amendments. So move, Mr. President.
There have been no objection. Motion is approved.
Mr. President, with no committee amendments, I move that we open the period of individual amendments.
There have been no objection. Motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we recognize the sponsor of the measure, the distinguished lady from the city of Las Piñas, and the chairperson of the Senate Committee on Agriculture, Senator Cynthia Villar, for individual amendments.
Our distinguished colleague from the city of Las Piñas, Senator Cynthia Villar, is recognized.
Mr. President, thank you. The following are my proposed individual amendments to Senate Bill 2243 under Committee Report number 85, or the proposed Philippine Salt Industry Development Act. Number 1, on Section 3, page 2,
Madam Chair, maybe just for orderly conduct of the amendments, can we do it page by page so this We can do page 1 first. Is there any amendments
No.
on page 1?
We start with page 2.
Okay, so to be clear, we have no amendments on page 1. Okay. On page 2, please proceed.
Number 1, on section 3, page 2, delete lines 4 to 7, starting from the word refers, and replace with the following. Producer refers to one who utilizes traditional methods of production using non-mechanized means.
There being no objection to the amendment, amendment is adopted.
Number 2, in section 3, page 2, lines 11 and 12, insert the following. Salt refers to unrefined salt derived directly from a living sea or ocean, harvested through the process of cooking, smoking, or solar evaporation.
Madam Sponsor, is this under industrial salt? Because the committee report, the line 10 and 11 is on industrial salt, letter D. Unless there's a new, may I ask for 1 minute suspension?
This is
Majority Leader, already understand the point of our distinguished sponsor. And just to clear, what she proposed was a new definition of term in between line 11 and 12, and it'll be letter E.
E.
Yes. Kasi hindi nabanggit yung letter E. Okay, so is that correct, Madam
Yes,
Sponsor?
yes, yes.
Okay,
Yes,
so
Mr. President.
and let me read. Letter E now will state salt refers to an unrefined salt derived directly from a living sea or ocean, harvested through the process of cooking, smoking, or solar evaporation. Regardless of the manner of production, it retains natural traces of minerals coming from sea water. There be no objection to the motion or the amendment. Amendment is adopted as letter E in the definition of terms. Please proceed, ma'am. And letter, unless you're going to add, okay. We will be adding more definitions, so. Please proceed, ma'am.
On Section 3, page 2, delete lines 15 to 22 and replace it with the following. Individual salt farm of not more than 50 hectares, and corporate or cooperative association salt farm of not more than 250 hectares.
It will be I and double I, right? I and double I, okay.
Okay.
What will happen to the large, so tanggal na po yung large, small scale farm, medium scale
I
farm?
think,
Deleted
Mr.
po?
President, our majority floor leader will redefine them in his amendments
Later.
later.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Can we go page by page, so line by line? May we ask, so that we don't have to go back to that amendment? Those who have any amendments on this section?
Okay, can we ask our,
Yes, ma'am. We will
our majority floor leader to make the amendment?
recognize the majority leader to make the amendment.
Yes, Mr. President, on page 2, lines 23 to 24, this is section 3, letter F on the definition of salt producer. After the word salt and the period, insert the following. Local salt producers shall be categorized as follows. Subsistence producer / manufacturer, a person or association engaged in the production, trade, and distribution of salt not exceeding 2 metric tons per year. Number 2, small producer, manufacturer, a person, corporation, or association engaged in the production, trade, and distribution of salt ranging from more than 2 metric tons to 300 metric tons per year. Number 3, medium producer, manufacturer, a person, corporation, or association engaged in the production, trade, and distribution of salt ranging from more than 300 metric tons to 200 metric tons per year.
2,000.
2,000, thank you, Your Honor. 2,000 metric tons per year. Number 4, last but not the least, large producer / manufacturer, a person, corporation, or association engaged in the production, trade, and distribution of salt exceeding 2,000 metric tons per year. And re-letter the succeeding items accordingly if the distinguished sponsor will accept these amendments, Mr. President.
Okay.
Yeah. Salt producer.
Then who
Yeah,
will be
salt
entitled
production.
sa ating tulong? The subsistence and the small? Ay, walang marginal.
Session suspended. For clarity, we just like to go back to the amendment of Senator Cynthia Villar, the sponsor, on Section 3, page 2, delete lines 15 to 22 and replace it with the following. Letter I, individual salt farms of not more than 50 hectares. Double I is corporate or cooperative / association salt farm of not more than 250 hectares. So this is under salt farm. Letter will be actually letter F. Yes, it will be letter F of salt farm. There being no objection to the amendment of the good sponsor? Chair hearing none, amendments adopted. And I believe the good majority leader is proposing under section 3, letter G, FG, it will be now G, salt producer, the aforementioned 4 amendments. Definition of local salt producers will be categorized as follows. That's 1, 2, 3, and 4. That will be occupying line 23 to 24. No, line 23. Yes. May you repeat, Mr. Majority Leader, because under line 20, magiging line 20, hindi na siya, mawawala na tayo sa line. So letter G, salt producer, refers
Yes,
to the
Mr.
individual,
President. Under.
corporation, cooperative, or associate involved in the production of salt.
Yes.
Where do you want to insert your amendment?
Yes, after
sir?
the word salt and the period, Mr. President, we insert the aforementioned 4
Categories.
local salt producers as categorized in the aforementioned provision, Mr. President.
Okay.
Tama ba yun?
If
With
it's
the
clear to
consent, with the
everyone.
consent of the sponsor.
Yes.
We,
Is it accepted, madam?
yeah, we accept the
Thank you.
amendment.
Therefore, there being no objection to the motion, the amendment is adopted. Please proceed.
On
Subject to
section,
style. Subject to
Subject to
style.
style, Mr. President.
on section 4, page 3, line 22, after the word industry, insert the phrase and salt iodization.
Madam, this is section 4, page 3. Okay, page 3, line 22.
Tinanggal na yun, line 22.
Line 22.
Tinanggal na yun, line 22.
After the word salt, industry, insert the phrase and salt
Tayo sa original na
iodization.
is na kasi yung sa kanan ng namin.
Ito,
Is that correct, madam?
Dito tayo sa original.
line 22. After the word industry, insert the phrase and salt iodization. I move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion, the amendment is adopted, subject to style. Please proceed, ma'am.
Okay. On section 5, page 4, delete.
On page 3, may I just ask, Madam Chair, Madam Sponsor, are there any more amendments on page 3?
Wala. No more.
No more, Mr.
Okay,
Mr.
please proceed.
President.
Please proceed.
On section 5, page 4, delete lines 12 to 13 and replace it with the following. J, Executive Director of National Fisheries Research and Development Institute, and relater the succeeding enumerations. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the amendment is adopted.
On the same section 5, page 4, line 16, after the word Philippines, add the phrase of salt-producing areas. I so move, Mr.
May I just
President.
ask the Majority Leader, you have an amendment here that you're proposing that is before the amendment that's being proposed now by the sponsor.
Wala naman.
The creation of the Philippine Salt Industry Development Council.
I am looking at the...
On page 4, line 11, it says here.
Oh, Mr. President, yes, Mr. President, thank you for reminding this representation. Mr. President, may I ask if we can propose an amendment by adding, Mr. President, or inserting a new item, the Secretary of the Department of Labor and Employment, Mr. President, or DOLE, to be part of the Salt Industry Development Council.
You may have to ask the,
If the distinguished sponsor will...
Hindi, pero naandun ba sa section? Naandun ba yun? Can you please justify?
Yes, Mr. President. I was about to say, Mr. President, not just DOLE, but TESDA. But considering, Mr. President, that the chairperson of TESDA's board is the secretary of the Department of Labor and Employment, I feel, Mr. President, that the DOLE will be able to oversee and make sure that the representation coming from the TESDA would be represented, Mr. President, considering that TESDA will continue to develop training regulations, Mr. President, with regard to revitalization of the salt industry.
I just want to point out to the majority floor leader that it will be BIFAR who will do the training, not the TESDA.
But how can we, again, the training program, Mr.
Because
President,
there
will be
is a,
fragmented again.
Mr. Majority Floor Leader, there is a training budget in the tariff that which we will collect, which will go to BIFAR.
Yes, Mr. President, and we don't mind before getting the budget, Mr. President, because to begin with, the training regulation or the competency standards is being implemented by the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority. So perhaps it is a good idea, Mr. President, distinguished colleague, that TESDA, or at least the DOLE, which is the chairperson of the TESDA board, would be represented, Mr. President.
Mr. Majority Floor Leader, from my experience, if there are many institutions which are involved, the more we are not succeeding. So I just
agree with
want
that,
to
Mr.
simplify the
I
the
agree with that,
process.
Mr. President. If the distinguished sponsor would not agree with this representation, I just feel, Mr. President, strongly feel that TESDA, or at least DOLE, should be represented in ensuring that the Salt Industry Development Council will thrive, Mr. President.
TESDA na lang.
So
hindi
if
na
we can...
DOLE. Hindi DOLE.
I'm more than willing to be...
Hindi, pareho silang nasa council.
Mr. President, we can lay this on the table if you want, distinguished colleague, so as not to
delay the proceedings.
belabor the proceedings, Mr. President.
So,
We can lay this on
we
the table.
can
if
talk
you want.
about it later when we're closing the period
Yes.
of amendment. Okay,
Yes,
thank
Mr.
you.
President, we thank the distinguished sponsor for
We
considering
take
this
note
representation.
on.
Thank you, Mr.
we take
President.
note. So
Thank you.
it's not yet adopted. Okay, please proceed, dear sponsor.
On same section, section 5, page 4, line 16, after the word, tapos na to? After the word Philippines, add the phrase of salt-producing areas.
So we're, just for order,
Page 4.
yung letter J, Executive Director of National Fisheries Council,
This is
NFR,
the next one.
Okay. Hindi pa yata
Page 4, section 5, line 16. After the word Philippines, add the phrase of salt-producing areas. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, the amendment is adopted.
On same section 5, page 4, line 26, delete the word sector and replace it with the phrase salt farmers cooperatives. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendment is adopted.
On section 6, page 5, between lines 5 and 6, insert the following. D, implement the mechanization of salt production process through provision of machinery and equipment such as, but not limited to, harvesters, motorized pumps to reduce operational costs, and re-letter the succeeding sub-paragraphs. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the amendment, amendment is adopted.
On same section 6, page 5, delete lines 11 to 13, starting from the word joint and replace with the phrase BIFAR provincial officer under the fisheries provincial offices under the Fisheries Post-Harvest Technology Division, or what we call FPHTD. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the amendment, amendments approved.
On Section 9, page 6, line 18, after the phrase "the DNR," insert the phrase "through its..."
Sorry, Madam. Sponsor, no other amendments on page 5? On page, yes, on page 5?
Yeah.
There being none, we move to page
Actually,
6. Please
Mr.
proceed.
President,
Yes, Madam.
may I ask if it pleases the sponsor if I make my amendments and follow, since it seems to be we're going page by page, but I had submitted it already, so it's the pleasure of the sponsor what she would prefer. Because some of my amendments are already passed, so
Okay.
perhaps her team is still reviewing, whatever's her pleasure.
That's okay. If you
If there's
would,
an amendment to these last 5 pages, we can
Meron po.
proceed. Kung,
Okay,
kung
sige.
hindi na
I have.
take up ng ating sponsor, you may proceed, Madam.
Okay.
okay. Ito, papalitan na.
Okay, on page 2, line 9.
So go back to page 2. Okay.
Yes, please.
Saan? Ayun.
It's the definition of iodized salt. So, the amendment is to delete the phrase "salt artificially coated with iodine" and replace with the phrase "ordinary salt with fortificant potassium iodate," parenthesis K103, close parenthesis. This is the definition by the DOH. We submit.
We accept the amendment.
They're duly accepted by the sponsor, therefore the amendment is adopted.
Then section 4.
We have on section 4, Your Honor.
Yes, can you read the amendment?
I can take care of it. I cannot, unfortunately, I cannot give you the line. Wait, give me a second because I have to reconcile it with my notes. The line is after Philippine salt. Where is that? Section 4. Philippine salt, is that it? For the attainment. Philippine salt, there you go. Okay. So, on page 3, line 1, after the word salt, delete the period and change it to a colon and insert the phrase, provided that the roadmap shall be aligned with the objectives and continued implementation of Republic Act Number 8172 or the Act for Salt Iodization Nationwide, parenthesis, ASIN, close parenthesis, which shall include the mandatory iodization of all food-grade salt as required under the ASIN law. End. We submit. End.
What does the sponsor
It
say?
says end. This one that had something else.
Would the sponsor like to confer with the proponent of the amendment?
So we accept the amendment.
The amendment's accepted, and therefore.
Thank you.
amendment's adopted.
Mr. President, subject to style, because I repeated the line, in the existing bill, it says the roadmap shall include the following objectives. Nandun pa rin yun. So may I just ask the Secretary to review subject to style? Pero wala nang nagbago doon. Thank you.
So if there is a double, again, we don't want to have a double insertion.
Yes.
of a-
No, Mr. President, it's just that yung siningit ko includes that phrase,
Double
the
phrase.
roadmap shall include the following objectives. Nandun pa rin yun.
So we are all right in reiterating it both times,
No.
or mentioning it both times?
I mentioned, I had said insert the phrase, and then I read that phrase.
Yes.
So that phrase is actually still in the law. So maybe we can just ask the Secretary to print out what I said so that makita na clean copy. But there's no repetition, Your Honor.
All right. Subject to style. So it's been adopted. Please proceed.
Ito na. Tapos na to?
Siya, wala na ito. Ano
Okay, I have an amendment on page 4.
Please proceed.
Line 9, insert the phrase Executive Director of the National Nutrition Council, parenthesis NNC, close parenthesis, and re-letter subsequently.
Hindi. Uh, uh, Mr. President, it's in the original law, which we did not remove, so we don't have to include it.
Your Honor, during the, if I may explain, during, while we were on break, I had asked the sponsor, what is the difference of this newly created SALT Council in this bill and the existing board ba yun? The existing board in the ASIN law. And Her Honor said that they are two separate entities. The ASIN board will continue, particularly for food grade
Yes,
salt.
yes.
And then this council is more for the development of the industry.
Yes,
So the reason, Your Honor, we are requesting, our proposal is to include the National Nutrition Council here is because we just want to be sure that the development of the salt industry will not forget that there is a health component. Ano lang naman siya, this
No.
representative is one of 13 or now 14 members that are all that have everything to do with trade and industry and agriculture. Yun lang, masama lang sa perspective. So in the same way
But,
that Her Honor is accepting our amendments that have a health perspective, it's just so that hindi naman makalimutan na may ganon.
No, but there is a member, the Secretary of the Department of Health.
Okay, in that case, Your Honor, although and the Nutrition Council is an attached agency, if Your Honor would prefer that they just work with the Secretary of Health, that is okay with me. We will withdraw the amendment, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
And also, just a quick policy question, my dear colleagues, and the Minority Leader could help me out on this together with our colleagues on the floor. On the creation of the Salt Development Council, Madam Sponsor, if I may be able to ask, because right here I see all the secretaries of the departments. They're all very busy. And I was watching a news item recently that they were not able to implement the law because they could not get a quorum with all these department secretaries in a council, in a particular council for a particular issue.
Yeah.
Do you want to just limit it to the department secretaries, or would you want?
No, they can send representative.
Should we spell it out? I think we should spell it out, Madam
Yes.
Chair.
Okay.
Kasi if we
I-
don't,
I would recommend, Your Honor, that we spell it out because yesterday
Yes.
in the DepEd hearing, the VP Secretary mentioned that they are involved in obviously we have passed hundreds of laws that require the secretary. So for the information of the body, in all the laws that this representation has passed in the last few years, we make it very clear that they can send a representative, Your Honor. It's
Yes.
up to the chair, the sponsor, if they want it to be, like we would usually put not lower than a USEC level or an ASEC level. We would put that, Your Honor, for the guidance of the implementing agencies.
maybe the end of all the amendments given, we'll go back to that. We'll ask the sponsor for her staff to craft the wording,
Yeah.
and then we can include that later on.
Okay. We accept that, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. So we'll ask the secretary, the ComSec to prepare the wordings to place the order designate. It's usually order designated undersecretaries maybe, so that they can, undersecretary level siguro para. Yes, Senator Tolentino.
Just an interjection, Mr. President. Perhaps in a conversation made with the sponsor, she agreed to delete the provision that would include implementing rules and regulations. So perhaps it should now be spelled out in the law itself that designees should be allowed to attend, Mr. President.
Yes.
We will
So
designate.
during the proper time when we take up the section on implementing rules and regulations, we can tackle that. But we all agree that there should be a line that says that their order designates. Okay, so we'll prepare, I'll come back to that later. Please proceed. So what was the motion on the health?
No, we withdrew, Your Honor. We withdrew.
Okay,
Yes.
please proceed on the next amendments.
And my next one is not until page 10, so I yield the floor to Her Honor.
So we go back to
Thank
page.
you very much.
Thank you. We go back to page 6.
Okay. Okay. On Section 9, page 6, line 18, after the phrase DNR, insert the phrase through its appropriate bureaus. I so move, Mr. President.
So it will read, pursuant to this act, the DNR through its appropriate bureaus and its attached agencies, agency.
Yes,
That's how it will be read, huh?
okay.
Madam. Okay. The DNR.
Okay,
Oh, its
and its attached agencies.
appropriate bureaus and its attached agencies. Not
Yes.
agency, but agencies.
Agencies, yes.
So,
Correct.
subject to style, the amendment is to add after DNR,
Insert the phrase,
insert the phrase.
through its appropriate bureaus and
Bureaus
attached
and attached
agencies.
Agencies, kasi right
Yeah.
now it is agency.
Isulat niyo yun.
Okay. There be
I
no
so move,
objection.
Mr. President.
There be no objection, the amendment is adopted, subject to style.
On Section 11, page 7, line 14, after the word instrument, insert the phrase or SPTI.
Line 14, ma'am. Line
Yes.
14.
After the word instrument, insert the phrase or SPTI.
Wala pong sa line, page 7 po. Sorry, page 7, okay. So wala na po tayong amendment sa page 6.
Wala
Madam
na po.
Sponsor. So page 7, under line
14.
14,
After the word instrument, insert the phrase or SPTI.
SPTI. There being no objection, amendments adopted.
On Section 11, page 7, line 24, after the word act, add another proviso which shall read, provided finally that the PFAR shall maintain a digital database of all applicants and holders of SPTI to ensure integrity of data, stronger data protection, and convenient data access. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is adopted. The amendment rather is adopted.
We go now to page 8. Okay?
No more amendments on page 7.
No more.
There being none, proceed to page 8, Madam.
On same section 11, page 8, delete lines 2 to 3 up to the word reckoned and replace with the statement, start salt farm construction and operation within 1 year. I so move, Mr. President.
Page, lines 2 to 3, page 8. Where is the word reckon, ma'am?
Reckoned,
Oh, under line 3, not 2 po.
2 to 3. Delete lines 2 to 3.
Delete lines 2 to 3. So that word will start with undertaking 2. And then,
Up to the word reckoned and replace it with the statement, start salt farm construction and operation within 1 year. I so move, Mr. President.
how will that paragraph read, ma'am?
Page 7. Page 7, line 24.
So, shall it be conditions for terminations which shall include an undertaking to start salt farm construction and operation within 1 year? Is that how you want to write it?
Yes, yes.
What about the granting, what about the succeeding lines, ma'am? What do we do with that?
On the same section, page 8, on lines 12 and 19, replace the word 4 with 3 and the number
So,
in
dali pa, ma'am,
parentheses.
hindi pa natin na-approve yung previous
Okay.
paragraph. May we know what it will read after we remove lines 2 and 3 and then your insertion of your amendment?
Saan ba yun?
Kasi medyo magulo po siya. Number 4, conditions for terminations which shall include an undertaking to start farm construction and operation within 1 year from the approval. Yeah. Okay. There being no objection to the amendment is adopted.
Okay. Next is on, thank you, Mr. President. On Section 11, Section 11, page 8, no. Page 8, on lines 12 and 19, replace the word 4 with 3 and the number in parentheses 4 with 3. I so move, Mr. President. Tama ba yun?
Replace the word for with 3. So hindi na 4 requirements, 3 requirements na lang. Okay.
And the number in parentheses 4 with 3.
With 3. There being no
I see.
objection to the amendment, amendments adopted.
On the same section, 11, page 8, delete lines 15 to 16 starting from the phrase "at most two" on line 15 and replace with the phrase "only the signatures of the regional director and the BIFAR director."
9:15 to 16.
I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion, amendments approved.
On same section 11, page 8, delete lines 22 to 25 and renumber the succeeding subparagraphs. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion, the amendment is adopted.
On same section 11, page 8, line 31 to page 9, line 1, delete the phrase "is located" and replace with the phrase "will be established." I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, the amendment is adopted. This is all subject to style, my dear Secretariat, for your review.
On same section 11, we're now on page 9.
No more amendments on page 8, my dear colleagues. If none, please proceed on page 9.
On the same section 11, page 9, delete lines 24 to 25 and replace with the following. Individuals may list up to 50 hectares of salt farms. Corporation or cooperatives / association may list up to 250 hectares. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the amendment, amendments adopted.
On section 13, we're now on page 10.
There being no amendments on page 9.
9?
Gentlemen, ladies,
Meron.
therefore we proceed to page 10. Please
Oh,
proceed.
there
ma'am.
is an amendment, I think, in page 9.
Ako po sa page 10 pa.
Meron pa ba sa page 9 po, ma'am,
9.
sponsor?
9, wala. So, we can
Page
go
10.
to page 10. What section?
Section 13, line 16.
We'll say first our amendment, okay? On section 13, page 10, delete line 16 to 18 and replace it with the following. Before, the following are the qualification for registration, the existing and the new. I so move, Mr. President. Babasahin pa lahat.
Naku, mahaba ito, ma'am. It is a, may I ask, session suspended for 1 minute. May I make the suggestion, my dear colleagues, I was discussing it here with the Secretariat. Let the Secretariat now do the style of how it will be printed out in the clean copy. We would just like to ask the sponsor to enumerate for cooperatives / associations, for new applicant, for existing applicants, so and so and so are the requirements. And then you'll mention for new applicants, so and so and so are the requirements. Then we'll proceed
Okay.
with the corporation,
Thank
individual,
you,
and artisanal.
Mr. President.
Yes, please proceed, ma'am, to read.
Okay. For existing cooperatives and associations, the following
I
requirements.
thought we'll be ahead. Sorry, Mr. President.
Oh, you're before
My-
Oh,
that,
you'll
ma'am?
be,
I have an
Interior
interior.
amendment, Mr. President.
Oh, please go ahead, with the permission of the sponsor, please go ahead, Senator Pia.
Yes, because it's also on page 10 and also on line 16. But it is in the sentence before the amendment of Her Honor. So, on line 16, the first word is before, and after that first word before, insert the phrase, provided that the Food and Drug Administration, parenthesis FDA, close parenthesis, shall retain its jurisdiction over the registration of salt for human consumption as provided under the ASIN Law and Republic Act Number 10611 or the Food Safety Act of 2013. We submit.
Can you repeat it again?
Yes, we can, Your Honor. So again, it's on line 16. After the first word in that line, which is before, insert the phrase, provided that the Food and Drug Administration, parenthesis FDA, close parenthesis, shall retain its jurisdiction over the registration of salt for human consumption as provided under the ASIN Law and Republic Act Number 10611 or the Food Safety Act of 2013. The rationale here, Your Honor, is that we are just being consistent with the ASIN Law, which Her Honor states is not being changed. We are saying that if in the ASIN Law, FDA had the jurisdiction over the registration of salt for human consumption, we're just reiterating that here, Your Honor.
Okay, we accept the amendment.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Therefore, amendments accepted by the sponsor and adopted. So please proceed. After that proviso, after that provided for na phrase of our distinguished colleague, now we will continue with the amendment of our distinguished colleague, Senator, distinguished sponsor.
On section 13, page 10, delete lines 16 to 18 and replace with the following. Before, the following are the qualification requirements for existing cooperatives and
Oh,
associations.
wala na po yung before kasi may provided for na
Okay,
siya.
sige.
So it will start with the following are qualifications, requirements for registration. Tama po. And then please proceed, ma'am, for
For
cooperatives and
existing
associations.
cooperatives and association, number 1, certification as existing salt producer from the local government unit where salt farm operates. Number 2, certificate of registration from CDA for cooperatives or from LGU where the farm site is located for farmers association. Number 3, production record for the immediately preceding year. And number 4, affidavit from applicant of existence of at least 50 members.
And then
I so
for new,
move, Mr.
and then for new, tuloy nyo na, ma'am.
For new registrant, if cooperative and association, the following are the requirement. Number 1, certificate of registration from CDA for cooperatives or from LGU where the proposed farm site is located for farmers association. Number 2, business plan. Number 3 is farm site inspection report from the provincial fisheries officer. And number 4, affidavit from applicant of existence of at least 50 members.
So move.
Okay. I so move. No, not yet. Finish. For corporation,
Yes,
for existing Securities and Exchange Commission registration. Number 2, certification as existing salt producer from the local government unit where salt farm operates, updated tax payment record, and proof of SSS Pag-ibig PhilHealth remittances. And for new registrant, corporation registrant, number 1, Securities and Exchange Commission registration, business plan, and farm site inspection report from the Provincial Fisheries Officer.
Yeah.
And,
Subject to style kasi you
yeah,
forgot already
yeah.
the ABC, ma'am. Sige lang. Okay lang. No,
And
1, 2, 3.
for individual and artisanal, okay, for existing, A, certificate as a salt producer from LGU and indication as artisanal if applicable, and B, production report for the immediately preceding year. For individual or artisanal, A, business plan, and B, farm production site inspection report from the Provincial Fisheries Officer. Registration shall be renewed after
Or
every 3 years. I so move, Mr. President.
There be no objection, subject to style. And I heavily, of course, emphasize that to the Secretariat. The amendment is accepted and adopted.
Mr. President, on Section 30, pages 10 to 11, on page 10, delete lines 28 to 32, and on page 11, delete lines 1 to 4. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion, the amendment is adopted.
On Section 14, page 11, delete lines 10 to 14, starting from the word small and replace with the phrase salt farms of cooperatives and association. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendment is adopted.
On the same Section 14, page 11, on line 15, delete starting from the word financial to line 17 up to the word directly and replace with the phrase material and technical assistance to salt farms of cooperatives and association. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, the amendment is adopted.
On the same Section 14, page 11, on line 20, delete the phrase salt production materials and replace it with input for salt farm development. And on line 21, delete the phrase capability building -- training and replace it with extension services. I so move, Mr. President.
There be no objection, the amendment is adopted.
On Section 14, page 11, delete lines 24 to 26 and replace with the following. This mandate shall be funded out of the tariff collection on imported salt as provided in Section 27 and 28 of this Act over and above the regular budget of BIFAR under the General Appropriations Act, or GAA. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendment is adopted.
We're now on page 12.
Yes,
Yes.
our distinguished
I
colleague,
actually-
Senator Pia Cayetano.
Thank you, Mr. President. I actually have a question before my amendment, so I know where is the proper section. May we know which agency would be in charge now of promoting salt products? Would it be BIFAR or DTI or any other?
BIFAR. Promotion,
DTI, no?
marketing.
I would assume it's DTI.
DTI.
Okay, so that means my amendment does not have to be here where Her Honor has an enumeration of the support for salt producers. I will, because this is more of a BIFAR mandate, I will make an amendment at the proper time. Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you. So please proceed, Madam Sponsor.
Okay. We're now on page 12. On
That's
section
correct.
16, line 8, delete the word DOST and replace it with the word DA, Philippine Center for Post-Harvest Development and Mechanization, or DA PhilMec. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion, the amendment is adopted.
On section 16, page 12, line 10, after the word also, insert the following: encourage the mechanization of salt production from pre to post-harvest end. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, the motion is approved and amendment adopted.
On page 12, section 17, lines 15 to 16, replace the phrase training program with extension programs, and delete the phrase Agricultural Training Institute, ATIN.
Yes.
Mr. President, if
Majority
I
Leader.
may,
I so move,
I was looking at the particular line, Mr. President, on section 17, training programs, under training programs, page 12, Mr. President. Because on line 16, Mr. President, this representation would like to propose an amendment after the acronym BIFAR, insert a comma and the phrase in coordination, at least, Mr. President, in coordination with DTI, DOST, DOLE, TESDA, and other relevant government agencies. In coordination lang, Mr. President, then insert a comma before the word shall. So, Section 17 shall now read, if I may, Mr. President, the BIFAR, in coordination with the DTI, DOST, DOLE, TESDA, and other relevant government agencies, shall provide complementary training programs that shall develop and upgrade the skills and competencies of Philippine salt producers, ensure product traceability and compliance to food safety, hasten technology acquisition, including product labeling and packaging, enhance skills on market positioning for Philippine artisanal, specialty, and industrial salts, and such other capabilities necessary in the maintenance and development of the local salt industry. Mr. President, we are proposing this particular amendment because, as already mentioned a while ago by our good colleague, Senator Pia Cayetano, DTI has the expertise on product traceability and enhancement of skills on market positions for Philippine artisanal, specialty, and industrial salts. In fact, both DTI and DOST has expertise on labeling and packaging. But in training programs, capacity building trainings, you have the TESDA, Mr. President. And the head of TESDA board is the Department of Labor and Employment. Again, this is to maintain and develop the revitalization of our salt industry. I submit, Mr. President.
We ask the sponsor to comment.
you know, from my experience, I have a farm school. When we accepted when we accepted Senator Pia's amendment, we were accepting that DTI will take care of the marketing. That is accepted, di ba? They're good in marketing. But training, I have a farm school, and it's really BIFAR who doing the teaching when it comes to fisheries and aquatic products. You know, it's hard to put everybody kasi magtuturo-turuan sila in the end. Mabuti yung pininpoint mo na kung sino para pag hindi ginawa siya may kasalanan.
I have a
Kasi
question,
pag
Mr.
maraming nagtuturo. I never experienced TESDA teaching aquatic products. I've never experienced that in my farm school.
In your farm school, Mr. President, I am talking about the policy of the government, why we have TESDA as an institution
No,
in charge,
I
Mr.
know.
President. So may I ask, Mr. President, if there are training regulations being implemented by BIFAR?
You know, yes. You
There
know,
are?
where do we use the TESDA? I gave money to TESDA, and they are
Okay.
paying for the tuition of all the students who are studying in my farm schools. But they never teach. They just pay for the tuition of the farmers because the farmers cannot afford to pay tuition, and the farm school will not operate if they have no income.
Mr. President,
So
if-
I gave a lot of budget to TESDA for them to pay for the tuition
Kasama
of
yata
all the
tayo.
farmers who are studying in the farm schools. Not my farm school. My farm school is free and I don't ask from TESDA. But the other farm school, there are 2,800 farm schools all over the Philippines. And TESDA never taught agriculture. They just pay for the tuition because the budget was given to them and they accredit the
May we know, Mr.
institution.
President, who has the mandate to implement training regulations in this country, Mr. President? Is it BIFAR or TESDA? Do they have the capacity
Yes,
to...
minute suspension.
President, we accept the amendment of the majority floor leader subject to style. Okay.
Yes, your amendment is accepted.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, dear colleague.
Thank you.
Okay.
Please proceed, madam. You are on page 12, section 17, I think. I believe.
Oh, yeah. Section 17,
Yes.
lines 15 to 16, replace the phrase training program with extension programs and delete the phrase agricultural training institute and make the necessary amendment as requested by our majority floor leader, subject to
subject to
style. Okay.
There being no objection, amendments are approved.
On section 18, page 12, line 26, delete the letters PHTD and replace it with FPHTD. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, amendment is adopted.
On section 23, page 14, we're now on page 14.
Any amendments on page 13, my dear colleagues? If there are no amendments on page 13, we shall proceed to page 14. Please proceed, Madam Sponsor.
On section 23, page 14, delete lines 1 to 5 and replace with the following. Section 23, importation and exportation of salt. Every person, natural or juridical, engaged in the importation and or exportation of salt shall first secure the clearance for said transaction from the following agencies. A, DOH FDA for iodized salt. B, DAB-FAR for non-iodized food-grade salt. And C, DAB-FAR for non-food grade salt. I so move, Mr. President.
Okay lang naman, di ba?
So the non-iodized food grade salt, shouldn't that also be under the FDA? Kasi
Gusto niyo yun?
food din yan, di ba? Kakainin din yan. For
This
export.
is
This is for
artisanal salt.
Okay.
They are not iodized, they are artisanal salt. Yung salt na pinoproduce for export na parang artisanal, it's an old way of producing salt. It's not iodized.
Pero ano to, importation to the majority leader, this is both importation and exportation. So if you import,
And even lagay na lang artisanal na lang instead of
so may I ask for a session suspended for 1 minute. May I make a suggestion to the two parties that we table the particular proposal first,
Yeah.
so that we can eventually take this back up after discussing it also with the DOH and other appropriate agencies. So we just continue with the other amendments.
So, Mr. President, I just want to make a manifestation that I'm willing to define the non-iodized food-grade salt as artisanal salt, and it's only less than 1% of all the salt production. So I want it exempted from iodization. So
I
that's
think
my
there's a
stand.
request by Senator Pia, she went up here to request, to give her just a bit of time to consult your dear sponsor. I'm with you because I believe artisanal salt is less than 1% and I don't want to kill the industry. But let's give a chance to our colleague. Maybe
Yeah.
we can skip your number 27 and the
Okay.
items,
Okay.
and then
We'll
we'll
go
move to number 28.
Section 25, page 14.
Yes.
Delete lines 24 to 25 up to the word hereby and replace it with the statement, the BIFAR Fisheries Post-Harvest Technology Division or BIFAR FPHTD is hereby.
There being no objection to the amendment, amendments adopted, subject to style.
Okay. On section 27, page 15, on lines 11 to 12, delete the phrase subject to existing free trade agreements on
May I ask for just one quick query? I know Senator Coco and Senator Risa have an amendment on section 25.
no,
Is it
it's-
already tackled?
Section 25, yes. Their amendment
Yes,
is
Mr.
section 25.
Yes, Mr. President, good sponsor. I have an amendment with
Section
Page
25?
13, page 14.
I have
Page
an amendment,
14.
Mr. President, jointly with Senator Pia Cayetano on page 14, line 13, section 25, to remove the phrase salt iodization for food-grade salt and replace it with the phrase iodization of salt that is not intended for human consumption and food production. I
And
so
then
move,
continues,
Mr. Chair,
and then,
Mr. President.
and continues
And then to
by-
continue on line
Continue
19,
on-
yes, to add a new last sentence that shall read, importers, traders, and distributors of
ask-
imported food-grade salt that will undertake fortification shall comply with the iodization standards set by the DOH, so that the new section would read, Section 25, National Iodization Program.
Okay.
Notwithstanding the provisions of Republic Act Number 8172 or the ASIN Law, iodization of salt that is not intended for human consumption or local food production is hereby rendered optional in the country, thereby modifying accordingly Sections 3 and 5 of said Act, provided that the DOH shall review and continue the implementation of the existing National Iodization Program and shall explore and institutionalize programs to continue salt iodization in the country. Such programs shall encourage and incentivize salt producers to iodize the production of food-grade salt. Importers, traders, and distributors of imported food-grade salt that will undertake fortification shall comply with the iodization standards set by the DOH. I so move, Mr. President.
What
We
say the
accept the
sponsor?
amendment.
Thank you.
It's accepted, therefore it is approved.
Thank you, good sponsor, and Mr. President, from this representation and as well on behalf of Senator Pia Cayetano. Thank you.
Thank you.
But we reserve the right to exempt the artisanal salt from iodization.
Mr. President, perhaps like our colleague, I await the further discussion of the plenary on that issue. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you,
you.
good sponsor.
So please proceed, Madam, on
On section 25, page 14, delete lines 24 to 25 up to the word hereby and replace it with the statement, "The BFAR Fisheries Post-Harvest Technology Division is hereby."
Wait, on section 25, page 14, line 24 to 25, you want delete lines 24 to 25 up to the word hereby.
And replace with the statement, "The BFAR Fisheries Post-Harvest Technology Division."
We accepted this already earlier, madam.
Okay.
Okay.
On
Please proceed.
section 27, page 15, on lines 11 to 12, delete the phrase "subject to existing free trade agreements." On line 28, replace the number 3 with number 2, and on line 30, replace the Roman numeral 9 with Roman numeral 8. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, the motion is approved, subject to style.
On section 28, page 16, delete line 2 starting from the word "account" to line 22 and replace it with the following: "Special account with the National Treasury, the SIBSEF shall exist for the next 10 years following the effectivity of this act. The allocation and utilization of SIBSEF shall be subject to the following guidelines. The SIBSEF shall be earmarked, released, and implemented as follows: provision of machinery and equipment Number one, provision of machinery and equipment including seawater pump, salt grader, salt harvester, dump trucks and bagging machine, and salt iodization machine for beneficiaries who are in salt iodization, 50% to be utilized and implemented by BFAR. Number 2, establishment of salt farm warehouses, storage areas, 40% to be utilized and implemented by DPWH. Number 3, conduct of extension services, 5% to be utilized and implemented by BFAR provincial offices. And number 4, development of modern salt production and processing technology, 5% to be utilized and implemented by the national NFRDI. Provided that the beneficiaries of the SIBSEP are the Salt Cooperative Association of Subsistence and Small Farmers Fisherfolks. Provided further that the earmarking percentage shall be reviewed at the end of the 5th year following the effectivity of this act for possible revisions and upgrading based on changes in intervention priorities. Provided furthermore that the allocation and disbursement of funds shall focus on the provinces of Pangasinan, Occidental Mindoro, Oriental Mindoro, Zambales, and La Union for the first 5 years upon effectivity of this act, which shall be implemented equally among existing and new established salt farms. At the end of the 10th year from the letter B, at the end of the 10th year from the effectivity of this act, a mandatory review shall be conducted by the Congressional Oversight Committee on Agriculture and Fisheries Modernization, or COCOFAM, to determine whether SIDSEF and its use as provided for under this act shall be continued, amended, or terminated. The COCOFAM shall utilize the increase or decrease in farmers' income as a primary benchmark in determining the effectiveness of the intervention under the SIDSEF and its possible extension. Okay?
And relater the
And
succeeding
relater the
paragraphs.
succeeding paragraphs.
My only question, Madam Sponsor, is on the allocation of the provinces that you mentioned. Is there a reason why it is only that the allocation and disbursement of the funds shall focus on the provinces of Pangasinan?
Because they are the
Sila-
type 8 provinces and the increase in production will come from them. Kasi they are, but we are not, this is, kasi very small lang yung collection and tariff, it's 600 million. So the others will be under the provision of the BFAR under what, under the GAA, ano pangalan nung, ano nila, yung kanilang program, SIDSE, ano? May pangalan yung program. They have a program under the GAA for the rest of the, what do you call this, salt industry, which
Parang-
they are implementing. Kasi ang
Do you
liit-liit
want to-
lang nito eh.
Do you want to pattern it, my suggestion, Madam Sponsor, do you want to pattern it to the tobacco law, which basically if this province produces the most salt, they get the biggest number, and so on and so forth. Because if we do it this way, Madam Sponsor, if I look at it, it's very biased only on this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 provinces.
Kasi meron silang kinlassify na type A province, type 1 provinces na talagang suited for salt production.
So yung Bulacan, walang salt Bulacan, ma'am? Walang salt ng Bulacan?
Wala.
Meron
Yung mga ibang provinces, more of artisanal. Kaya meron silang maliit na production. But this one, these are the, talaga,
Maybe, can we word it in such a way that the allocation, disbursement of funds will be focused on the provinces which have the large concentration of salt farms, rather than naming
sila
the
na rin
provinces?
Sila na rin yun.
Oo nga po, ma'am.
Tiningnan ko na yung ranking eh. Sila talaga yung mga provinces that have a lot of salt farms. And the production is malaki, no? Oo. So pinili na namin yung more than 1,000 metric tons, no? The others are 100 metric tons. Small,
But
very
supposing,
small.
Madam Sponsor, this is supposed to be the act that is supposed to
No, but they are not
salt.
also suited for salt production. Ito na yung malalaki at ito din yung type A. Sila na yung suited for salt production. Sila rin ang malalaki ang land for salt, ang coastal for salt production. Kasi remember, merong ding effect ang weather at saka yung quality of the coastal areas and the weather. Kasi yung meron kasi mga provinces na 3 months lang ang dry weather. 6 months dapat.
Opo, pero for example, nandito yung La Union. What about Ilocos Norte? Wala dito.
Maliit eh.
Ilocos Sur.
Maliit ang production.
Pero maybe maliit because of the existing laws now.
No. Talagang maliit.
Session suspended.
Maliit talaga.
I would like to propose an amendment, if I may.
Yeah.
It seems that there's no argument or objection to the rest of the amendments, only with the paragraph where it says the allocation and disbursement. Maybe we can say, provided furthermore, that the allocation disbursement funds shall focus on the provinces that produce the most number of salt, or that have the most number of salt farms.
Okay. I accept the amendment.
Thank you. And then we will remove the word,
The name of
names
the
of the provinces, yes.
Okay. Subject to style.
Subject to style.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Sponsor. So the amendment is approved, the whole amendment that was read into the record, except for this amendment to the amendment.
Okay. On section 32, page 18, line 2, after the word budget, add the statement as particularly provided in sections 15, 20, and 21 of this act. Okay, I move for the amendment.
There being no objection to the motion, the amendment is adopted.
On page 18, between lines 6 and 7, insert a new section which will read as follows. Section 34, we are removing this.
Ayaw yata to ni
Oh, kaya
Senator
nga.
Tolentino, so
No.
we don't
I
anymore
withdraw
include
the
this.
amendment.
Okay, amendment is therefore withdrawn. Please proceed, ma'am.
That's all, Mr. President.
Thank you, and we will ask the Secretariat, subject to style, to renumber all the provisions that have to be renumbered and relettered, subject
And
to style.
then we will recall all the changes of Senator Pia and who else?
Yes.
Yeah,
What we will do,
okay.
Madam Sponsor, if you don't mind, we'll come up with a clean copy first. Let's come up with a clean
Yes.
copy.
And we'll do it tomorrow.
We can do it first thing in tomorrow again.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. President.
Yes. So for the record, Madam Sponsor, thank you very much as well, ma'am. We have 3 items on the table, which is basically the artisanal exemption of the artisanal salt from these requirements. Pangalawa, yung dole as part of the council. Ano pa? Yung sa import and export.
No, I think we have discussed that, but we are rephrasing na.
Yeah, rephrasing it na lang.
Rephrasing lang. We have accepted that, but we have to rephrase that it's
Okay.
more of, what do you call that?
Which one po, ma'am?
It's not being a member, but in control of the, ano yung word?
Ande, yan yung,
in coordination.
okay na po
yeah.
yan. You accepted that na, ma'am eh. Accepted na po yan. This is just, I think, the motion of Senator Joel, our majority leader, on including the dole as part of the council. So you have not agreed. And I think,
I think what we don't like, because this is entrepreneurial. In this, mga small farmers, they're not employees. They are entrepreneurs.
anyway,
And on my end, Mr. President, if I may,
yes.
this is an opportunity for us to create jobs. And Dole is in that business of facilitating job
And
creation.
also, that we'll add also tomorrow, my dear colleagues,
We can discuss
a
it
line on that on the council, the creation of the council,
Yes.
of the designation of the secretary
Yes.
with the undersecretary. So
yes.
we come up with the
Probably
right.
at least USEC or ASEC level, Mr. President.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Subject to style na lang.
Subject to style. Yes, Mr. President, with that, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2243 under Committee Report number 85. So move, Mr. President.
Yes, there being no objection, the motion is approved.
May I ask for a minute suspension, Mr. President?
Session suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we consider proposed Senate Resolution number 711. This is the resolution commending and congratulating the Filipino keglers. I so move, Mr. President.
Yes, there being no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we ask the Secretary General
title
to
of
read the title of the measure.
Yes, please proceed, Secretary.
Resolution commending and congratulating the Filipino Keglers for winning gold medals in the 21st Asian Youth 10-Pin Bowling Championships held at the Blue or Rhythm and Bowl in Bangkok, Thailand.
Mr. President, with the consent of the body, I move that we recognize the chairperson of the Senate Committee on Sports, Senator Christopher Bongo, to deliver the sponsorship speech.
Our distinguished colleague from Davao and Batangas is recognized, Senator Bongo.
A pleasant afternoon to all of you, Mr. President and distinguished colleagues. As Chairman of the Committee on Sports, it is my esteemed privilege to sponsor the Senate resolution commending and congratulating the Filipino bowlers, for they have brought pride and honor by winning gold medals in the 21st Asian Youth 10-Pin Bowling Championships held in Bangkok, Thailand. The Philippine bowlers team achieved an extraordinary feat as they have emerged victorious by capturing the overall championship for the first time. Likewise, their exceptional skill earned them not just one, but 2 gold medals in the fiercely contested international bowling competition. This triumph stands as a testament to their commitment and dedication, which serves as a source of pride and honor to our nation. Mr. President, I would like to take this opportunity to convey my commendation to Artigal Barrientos, who has achieved a remarkable victory by earning a gold medal in the boys master division. Further, Barrientos, alongside with Sak Ramin, Stephen Luke Diwa, and Mark Dailan Custodio, successfully clinched the championship title in the boys division. Also, my gratitude goes to the coaches, mentors, and the entire support staff who have played an instrumental role in molding our outstanding athletes. Kayong lahat po ay simbolo ng lakas at isang malaking inspirasyon sa ating mga kababayan. Maraming salamat sa pag-alay po ng inyong sakripisyo para mabigyang dangal ang ating bansa. Rest assured that I will continue to pursue sports development programs and initiatives that will promote the welfare of our athletes to further elevate our status in the sporting world. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, dear sponsor.
Mr. President, thank you, Senator Bongo. Mr. President, no other member wishes to interpolate or propose any amendments to the measure. I move that we adopt proposed Senate Resolution number 711, subject to style. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, proposed Senate Resolution number 711 is hereby adopted, subject to style. Congratulations.
Mr. President, before we suspend the session, may I, and with the permission of the body, may I move that all members of the Senate be made co-authors of this resolution?
We
So
take
moved,
note
Mr.
and put that on record. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for a minute suspension.
We move for a minute suspension to ask the honorees to come up here on the podium to receive their resolutions.
Yes, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we take up some privileged speeches and recognize the distinguished gentleman from Bicol region and province of Nueva Ecija, no other than Senator Robin Hood Padilla, to deliver his privileged speech, Mr. President.
Our distinguished colleague from adopted son of Mindanao also, and as well as Bicol and Central Luzon, Senator Robin Hood Padilla is recognized.
Maraming salamat po, Ginoong Pangulo, at sa ating pinunong mayorya. Sa ating pong mga iginagalang na miyembro ng lupon, ako po ay tumitindig sa bulwagang ito upang ilahad ang isang masukal na issue ng hindi umano'y kaso po, muli na naman, ng mistaken identity. Ang sangkot po ay isang 62 taong gulang, 62 years old, tubong Baloi, Lanao del Norte, na nagngangalang Muhammad Maka Antal Said. Nitong nagdaang linggo ay sinundan po ng aming tanggapan ang kaso ni Tatay Muhammad. Araw po ng Huwebes, 10 ng Agosto, papunta ng Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, si Tatay Muhammad ay harangin ng mga tauhan ng Bureau of Immigration sa Naya Terminal 3 matapos magkaroon ng alert ang kanyang pangalan. Agad pong inaresto si Tatay Muhammad at ikinulong sa Building 14 ng New Bilibid Prison sa Muntinlupa, isang temporary detention facility ng National Bureau of Investigation. Sa investigasyon po, natuklasan ng NBI International Airport Investigation Division na mayroong 9 na warrants of arrest para sa isang Muhammad Said, also known as Ama Maas, na tugma sa pangalan at pagkakakilanlan ni Tatay. Ang mga hindi mapabubulaan ng katotohanan. Una, makikita niyo po dito, Ginoong Pangulo, masdan po natin ang larawan ng sinasabing wanted Muhammad alias Ama Maas sa kaliwa at si Tatay naman sa kanan. Kayo na po ang humusga kung iisang tao po yan. Tingnan nyo naman po, ay kalayo-layo po talaga. Pangalawa, taong 2018, nang mapagkamalan rin bilang wanted si Tatay, pagbaba ng airport galing sa kanyang biyahe sa ibang bansa dahil sa kanyang pangalan. Hinuli at pinusasan din. Ngunit dahil walang mabigat na dokumento at patunay ay nirelease din kagad ng NBI. Pangatlo, mismong National Bureau of Investigation ang nag-issue ng clearance noong 2018 at 2019 na nagpapakita ng no derogatory record ni Tatay. Pang-apat, ayon po sa pamilya Said, simula 2001 hanggang Oktubre 2011 ay nasa Saudi Arabia si Tatay. Ngunit ang nasabing krimen na kinasasangkutan ni Ama Maas ay naganap noong July 2011. At ito po, Ginoong Pangulo, ang matinding pasabog. Panglima, taong 2016 pa lamang ay lumabas na ang mga balitang napatay na sa engkwentro si Ama Maas. Ito po ay engkwentro pagitan ng puwersang militar ng gobyerno, operasyon nila sa Sulu. Ginoong Tagapangulo, paanong mapipiit sa bilangguan ang isang individual na may NBI clearance na no derogatory record? Malayang nakalabas-pasok sa bansa ng ilang ulit, wala sa Pilipinas sa panahong sinasabing nangyari ang mga krimen, at higit sa lahat, malayong hindi tumutugma ang itsura ng akusado na ayon po sa mga balita ay 7 taon nang naulat na patay. dahil lamang po kapangalan niya yung Muhammad Said. Ginoong Tagapangulo, nais ko pong bigyan diin na marami pa ring butas ang ating polisiya sa information sharing sa pagitan ng mga ahensya. Meron po ba tayong teknolohiyal na infrastruktura para sa harmonized, integrated at interconnected na sistema ng gobyerno? Ang pinakamahalagang punto po ay ang pagsusuri ng ating sistema at polisiya para sa ating mga ahensyang nagpapatupad ng batas sa pamamagitan ng pagbibigay ng tumpak na kritikal na impormasyon sa paghuli sa mga aktwal na kriminal. Ang kaso po ng mistaken identity ay hindi makatwiran, hindi makatarungan at hindi makatao. Hindi na po ito katanggap-tanggap, lalo na sa panahon na bumubuhos ang technology at innovation. Kung nais natin ibalik ang buong tiwala ng publiko at patatagin ng pundasyon ng isang makatarungang lipunan, wala na pong Pilipino ang matutulad sa kapalaran na sinapit ni Tatay Muhammad. Ginoong Pangulo, nakalulungkot po itong isipin sapagkat ito po'y may halo na namang diskriminasyon na inyo pong ipinaglaban sa panahon ng inyong pinalakas ang Bangsamoro Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao. Ito na naman po ay isa na namang lamat. Isa na naman po itong pag-uusapan ng mga kapatid sapagkat tayo po ay pinamumugaran na naman ng mga, maswerte na lang po si tatay at hindi siya binahayan ng bala. Nakatulad po sa nangyari doon sa isang bata sa Nabotas. Ito po, mahal na Ginoong Pangulo, ay inilalapit ko po sa ating lupon upang mabigyan po ng hustisya ang matandang Muslim na ito, na Tagalanaw, na sa mga oras na ito, Ginoong Pangulo, ay naghihimas ng rehas. Nakakulong pa rin po siya. Inilapit po namin to sa korte. Ang sabi ng korte, kailangan pang dumaan sa proseso. Hindi ko na po maintindihan. Ano pang proseso ang kailangan? Patay na pong matagal yung suspect na sinasabi nila. Kaya po, Ginoong Pangulo, nasa inyo pong mga kamay, bilang kayo po ang ama ng Bangsamoro, hinihingi po namin ang hustisya para kay Tatay Muhammad. Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat sa ating kapatid na si Senator Robin Hood Padilla. At ang simpatiya ko po ay nasa inyo at sa pamilya ni tatay. At hindi lamang dahil siya ay Muslim na tinutulungan natin siya dito, dahil siya ay isang citizen ng ating republika, meron po tayo mga panukala, may mga batas na nabibigay po ng kanya karapatan. Kung mistaken identity yun, dapat hindi siya na ilagay sa kulungan. And if there was a justice denied to the person, then definitely also a penalty should be given to those who had rendered his denial of justice and his arbitrary detention without a due process. So, Majority Leader, shall we refer it immediately to the Committee on Justice? Yeah. Yes, sir. Minority Floor Leader is recognized.
Mr. President, I was just alarmed with what I heard, so if I could just ask our colleague who brought this to our attention some additional facts so that we will familiarize ourselves with what happened. So, ang sabi po ni Senator Robin ay nakakulong pa?
Nakakulong pa
Si
po
Tatay
siya
Muhammad?
hanggang ngayon. Opo.
Ba't kailan ba ito nangyari po?
Nung isang buwan po ito, magmula po nung nakulong po siya, binantayan na po namin yung kaso niya, humingi na po kami ng tulong sa PAO, kami po ay nagpunta na rin po dun sa Taguig Court na humahawak 9 na kaso po eh. Ito lamang pong huli na hindi na po ako makatulog talaga dahil nakuha po namin yung report na matagal na po palang patay yung original na suspect. Paano nakulong pa ito? Patay na pala yung suspect.
So more than a month na po, at andun po siya sa
Bilibid po.
holding, yung temporary detention
Opo, sa
center
Building 14. Opo.
na pinapatakbo ng NBI.
Opo, pero nasa loob po ng Bureau of Correction to, yung Building 14.
Opo, sa loob ng NBP, opo. Tapos ang nangyari po rito, siya po ay palabas ng bansa, and then
Hinarang po ng immigration natin.
na may lumabas siguro ng information sa kanilang computer, tapos
Opo.
sino po ang aktual na nag-aresto kay Tatay Muhammad po?
NBI po. NBI po sa airport natin. Yung kanila pong parang Interpol.
Opo, so meron tapos may ang ginagamit nilang dahilan is na
May mga
outstanding warrant of arrest
Opo.
na lampas sa isa ang bilang.
Opo, siyam daw po.
Okay, siyam na kaso. Okay, pero ang pagkakaalam ko kasi, Mr. President, a warrant of arrest would be more than just a first name and more than just a surname. Meron siguro distinguishing middle name or some other initial po dyan. And, or an alias, sometimes ganon. So, I hope that our law enforcers took this into account when they were convincing themselves that they were arresting the correct person, which is the subject of the warrant of arrest. Nangyayari sa ibang bansa yan, nakikita naman natin sa na may mistaken identity, pero hindi po tatagal ng 30 days na nakakulong. I mean,
Opo, ito napakatagal na po.
Kaya po ako
Opo.
medyo na-alarma, kaya nga nung sinabi po ni kapatid na Robin na hanggang ngayon sabi mo, ano yung distinction, ano yung
Naghihimas
description?
po ng
Naghihimas
rehas.
pa ng rehas.
Opo.
Siguro, when we set this, ang problema, when we have to set this for hearing, kakain pa ng panahon yun. Dapat siguro makita po natin, Mr. President, ano ba yung na-report sa monitor ng ating immigration at gaano ba kalapit yung description o pangalan doon sa monitor na lumabas sa pasaporte po ng ating ni Tatay Muhammad po. Kasi siguro may mga date, sometimes may date of birth pa siguro dyan, Mr. President. Na kung yung si Maas
Maas po, opo.
sa tingin ko, mga ilang taon po yun, mga 30, 40?
Mga ganun po.
Si
opo,
Tatay
itsura
Muhammad
nun.
po, ilang taon na?
62 na po.
O yun po, medyo sometimes medyo ano na yan you don't need scientific proof already to to convince yourself na we have a wrong wrong person, so anyway, Mr. President, tignan po natin kung anong magawa natin dito in the meantime, and then I think this will be referred to the proper committee at talagang ma-examine na natin ano nga naman yung how they share information, what information they share, and how lacking is the information that they share.
Yes.
Yun po yung importante malaman po natin. At in the meantime, siguro I'm sure nakatutok naman si kapatid na Robin dito sa kaso with all his lawyers po. Nakikita ko naman si Panyero doon sa likod Tulungan na lang po natin si Tatay Mohammed if it's really a clear case of mistaken identity, Mr. President.
Yes.
Maraming salamat po.
And I believe also we should modernize also, maybe during the discussions in the hearings, we should also modernize the Bureau of Immigrations and look at the procedures that they have done. We've already criticized them on the IACAT issue, and maybe we should already start going into a more modernized system like biometrics. Kasi sa US, sa ibang bansa na, sa Europe, when you go, they just take a video of you on your face and they'll know already if there's a hit and a red flag. So it's no longer just the same name. Hindi na yung kapangalan. It is now a hit on the biometrics. When they see a facial recognition and there's a red flag, that is a more clear definition. Dito, klaro-klaro, hindi magkapareho yung muka. Kapangalan lang. So first we'll have Senator, our Deputy Minority Leader, and then after which we'll have also Senator Tolentino.
Salamat kaayo, Mr. President. Maikling manifestasyon lamang ng pagpapahayag ng appreciation sa good gentleman na naghain ng kanilang privilege speech. Sukran kay Senator Robin Hood Padilla dun sa pagbanggit nung maling paggamit nung dahilan o pagdadahilan ng mistaken identity sa kaso pong ito ni Tatay Muhammad. At sukran sa pagbanggit din sa kaso nung pagpatay dun sa isang kabataan sa Navotas, si Jemboy Baltasar. Siguro po talaga, Mr. President, good gentleman, matagal na po yung panahon na dapat tigilin na yung masyadong madaling paggamit ng dahilan o pagdadahilan ng mistaken identity. Lalo na kung kasama pa ng factor ng sinasabi nilang diskriminasyon, tulad dito sa kaso ni Tatay Muhammad, na nagbunga na nasyak po tayong lahat, isang buwan na pala po silang biktima ng di umanong mistaken identity sa loob ng bilangguan. At gayon din po sa kaso ni Jemboy Baltasar, dahil sa pagdadahilan ng mistaken identity, ay nagamitan pa ng excessive force, pinaulanan ng bala hanggang mamatay, nalunod at namatay. Kaya't sinusubaybayan din po natin, bukod sa dapat na pagbigay ng hustisya kay Tatay Muhammad, yung pagbibigay din ng hustisya sa naulilang pamilya ni Jemboy Baltasar. Dahil sila po ay itinaas yung napakababang unang inihain na kaso na, ano nga yung kasong inihain lamang? Parang pagkakamali lang. Reckless imprudence lamang na itinaas nung kanyang pamilya sa murder. Ano po, opo. So, ito po sanang mga mapapait na karanasan ni Tatay Muhammad, ng pamilya ni Jemboy Baltasar, ngayon pati pamilya ni James Ompad, opo, ng pamilyang Ompad, subject din po, good gentleman, ng isa pang resolusyong inihain ko tungkol sa pagpatay nitong nakaraang mga buwan sa ating mga kabataan sa kamay pa ng Philippine National Police. Matagal na po sigurong panahon ang ating mga regulatory agencies tulad ng Bureau of Immigration at law enforcement agencies tulad ng Philippine National Police ay makapag-review at wasto sa mga polisiyang kanilang ipinatutupad at paraan na kanilang ipinatutupad para hindi po nagbubunga ng pang-aabuso sa mga karapatan na ating mga mamamayan gamit ang pagdadahilang mistaken identity. So yun lamang po, Mr. President. Salamat kaayo at muli, syukran sa good gentleman.
Our distinguished colleague from Cavite is also raising his hand. Please proceed, Senator Tolentino.
Once again, Mr. President, I associate myself with the privileged speech of our colleague here, Senator Padilla. And while we commiserate with the plight of Tatay Muhammad, I just found out, Mr. President, just for the record, this afternoon I had a budget briefing involving the Commission on Filipinos Overseas. And I found out, Mr. President, that the IACAT is not totally the handle of the Bureau of Immigration, but the Commission on Filipinos Overseas have a vital role to play. They're supposed to be the advocom. They had the advocom, and they were supposed to, under their mandate, they were supposed to inform travelers ahead of their initial contact with the Bureau of Immigration and Deportation, Mr. President. So, medyo naguluhan ako sa budget briefing kanina, but they admitted that they're part of this IACAT and sila po yung nangunguna. Just for the record, Mr. President. Again, I associate myself with the privilege of our colleague here, Senator Robin Hood Padilla, who accompanied me several times to the maximum security compound of the National Bilibid Prisons, Mr. President. Salamat po.
Thank you very much, Senator Tolentino. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, before I refer the said privileged speech, Mr. President, let me just state for the record my sincerest thanks and gratitude and support to our colleague, Senator Robin Hood Padilla, for this concerning issue, Mr. President. I have to admit, Mr. President, napakahirap nung ganong karanasan. I had that experience in the United States of America 3 times, Mr. President, not only twice but thrice, even taking a domestic flight. But hindi ko naranasan yung ganong kagrabe, Mr. President, na binanggit ng ating kasamahan kay Tatay Muhammad. At nakakalungkot lang, Mr. President, because when I was a member of the House of Representatives, I remember there was a time na may kapangalan din ako na murder daw yung case, and so I have to undergo a lot of checks and protocol, etc. And it took me, Mr. President, almost a year. Obviously, hindi ako yun dahil nasa Congress na po ako and lahat nakikooperate ako. But it took some time. So again, gusto ko lang sabihin, Mr. President, justice delayed is justice denied. So I hope and pray, and I support our dear colleague in seeking for justice, Mr. President. With that, Mr. President, I move that we refer the speech of the distinguished gentleman, Senator Robin Hood Padilla, and the manifestations thereon to the Committee on Justice and Human Rights. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
Mr. President, this juncture, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2426 under Committee Report number 107. This is the bill on Tatak Pinoy, Proudly Filipino Act. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection, motion is approved.
Mr.
We'd like to
President,
recognize the sponsor.
the
Senator-
parliamentary
yes.
status, Mr. President, is that we have sponsored the measure. And with that, I move to open the period of interpellations and debate and recognize the sponsor, Senator Sani Angara.
I recall that he sponsored it with a 45-minute long, record-breaking sponsorship speech. 2 hours ba yun? 1 hour lang. 2? Okay. Let us give him a chance to redeem himself with the interpellation of his measure. Our distinguished colleague who had 8 marathon hearings on this Tatak Pinoy advocacy.
And
No
to
other than
interpellate,
Senator-
Mr. President,
Yes, no
and
other
to
than Senator Sani Angara.
and to interpellate our distinguished minority leader who is acting like he's surprised, Mr. President, to interpellate. But we thank
It would
our dear
be-
colleague for cooperating with the wishes
majority.
of this chamber, Mr. President.
Thank you. We appreciate
It would be-
Thank
the
you.
hard
It
work
would
that
be
the
my-
minority leaders
Yeah.
giving.
Mr. President, it would be my honor to interpolate on this measure because I listened intently to the sponsorship speech, which sounded like a sauna to me.
Yes. That's a,
Thank you.
tackling many industries.
Thank you very
Please
much,
proceed.
Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader. Thank you, especially to the Minority Leader for the compliment. I think he was the only one who listened to the entire speech, Mr. President.
No, we were all here in the first part.
We'll object,
I
Mr. President.
I saw a lot of colleagues come in and out of the plenary during my speech.
I object with that, Mr. President. We listen.
Inside.
Thank you, Mr. President. So if I, with the permission of our
please
sponsor,
It
if
would
I
be an
can-
honor to our idol and compadre, Mr. President.
So, Mr. President, when I was listening intently to the sponsorship speech, I got the impression that this was not really a physical mark, although because the short name of the measure is Tatak Pinoy. So initially, I thought this was going to be a mark. But actually, at the end, I realized that this is actually either an initiative or like a strategy which the government is going to adopt through a council. Is that correct, Mr. President?
That is correct, Mr. President. It's not. We don't have any intent yet to patent it or to give it a legal independent existence. Although, now that I think about it, it might be a good provision to insert, or maybe it's something to pursue later on. But yes, it is a strategy, and it's something to elicit national pride and to put throughout the bureaucracy, to have that strategy throughout all the agencies, bureaus, whether here or abroad, in order to push more complex and sophisticated Philippine products and offerings with the end goal of raising incomes of our countrymen, because it's proven that the countries or economies with the greatest complexity in producing the most number of complex goods are those which also have very positive economic indicators like higher per capita GDP, less poverty, for instance, Mr. President, Your Honor. So there is that proven correlation borne out by the studies of some of the experts in the field of development economics and political economy, Mr. President.
Yeah, yes, Mr. President. This term economic complexity is mentioned also in the bill, and the bill also requires the putting up of a Tatak Pinoy Council, if I'm not mistaken with the name, Mr. President. That's a Tatak. Yes, the Tatak Pinoy. So, how will the Tatak Pinoy Council, Mr. President, make good use of the concept of economic complexity? Mr. President.
The council is there, among others, Mr. President, to ensure that we are firing on all fronts, so to speak, meaning all agencies, not just the DTI, which is currently, at present, I think the main agency in the government which is pursuing a Tatak Pinoy strategy in pushing for greater exports, in incentivizing, along with perhaps the investment promotion agencies, but also to download that strategy to agencies which don't seem to have it in their philosophy or paradigm, like maybe the Department of Agriculture, the DICT, maybe even the Department of National Defense, where really when these are some Department of Education, some of the Department of Public Works, some of the agencies with the biggest budgets and perhaps able in government procurement alone, able to impact upon Philippine industries and products if they prioritize the purchase of Philippine supplies and products in their procurement, Mr. President.
So, thank you for that reply, Mr. President. So, let's assume that there is already, this bill becomes law and there's already an existing Tatak Pinoy Council. What would be an example of a concrete result of the establishment of the council, Mr. President?
Well, one thing I can think of, for instance, Mr. President, is the semiconductor industry is one of the biggest exports of the Philippines, but so far, our offerings or exports have been maybe categorized in the lower value added. So I think you need certain public goods or infrastructure that the government can jointly provide that can be of use to not to particular actors or corporations, but to industries as a whole, perhaps to the whole semiconductor industry, so that they can produce more complex offerings. This was mentioned to us by the SAPI, or the Semiconductor Industry of the Philippines, which, I think more than half of the Philippines' exports are semiconductors, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. President. So that we can be something like what Taiwan became, producing very low-end products. And Taiwan is a younger state than us because, you're familiar with the history of Taiwan. They left China. But then yet in that small time, perhaps because of the imperative of having to survive separately from the mainland, they developed such very sophisticated and complex industries because they imbibed that spirit of complexity, Mr. President. And now they produce laptops and, whereas there was a time when they were known to produce very cheap and even non-original products, Mr. President. So something along those lines. We don't have to reinvent the wheel and say from 0 we'll go to 10. It's really looking at what we have. Perhaps if we are a 2 or a 3 in terms of semiconductors, then perhaps in the next few years we can be a 4 or a 5, Mr. President.
Yeah, what specifically is the contribution of the council? Hindi lang yung mananawagan sila, di ba? Kasi madali lang yung panawagan na, let's produce more economically complex things. But what specific thing will they be like the creatives industry council we put up, where there is a creatives plan and then they will actually be given a budget to lend out, etc. But is this what we envision with the Tatak Pinoy
That is
Council?
one of because the goal of complexity is so thorough and far-reaching, Mr. President. There are so many possible interventions. And as you mentioned, access to credit is one of them, access to markets, which the DTI already does. But the DTI doesn't have the power, perhaps, to create or to fund major infrastructure, for instance. What is that? Ano yung sinabi ni Dan Lachica? A wafer fabrication is what they mentioned, the semiconductor industry mentioned. And what's the cost of that? Yeah, that's in the several millions, Mr. President. So they can recommend that the government fund that, and then kami dito when we receive that information, that recommendation, we can fund it. In fact, I'm already asking how much it is. So maybe in the next 2 years of our budget cycle, maybe we can find the funds to fund these kinds of interventions here and there and get that process going where we can move up to higher value, because the result is higher incomes, higher value added, which results in higher paying jobs, Mr. President.
And without the Tatak Pinoy Council, Mr. President, DTI, as currently organized, specifically the Secretary, cannot make such a recommendation or a call, Mr. President?
I think the DTI already functions very well, Mr. President, but according to them, kulang talaga sila ng tao. And if we restrict it to the current personnel or manpower component or structure, many of the agencies do not have the people who are trained to market Philippine products and to think along those lines. That's why that council is there, along with the Secretariat, to assist them, the agencies who will come on board and perform the same functions that the DTI is doing already, as well as our other investment promotion agencies, the BOI, the PEZA, and the other ecozones who are actively, maybe AFAB, I think is notable in terms of producing a lot of exports and attracting a lot of investments, both local and foreign, Mr. President.
Given the concepts, Mr. President, that we are discussing, actually, sa tingin ko, infinite yung possible ideas na manggagaling sa Tatak Pinoy Council. Which reminds me actually of also of the Creatives Industry Development Council. So, are there no overlaps with the existing councils, think tanks, or bodies, Mr. President?
There definitely is, Mr. President. There would be an overlap with the Innovation Council because
Innovation Council.
some of the ways by which complexity is achieved is definitely through R&D and innovation. So kailangan lahat ng council na yan, yung MSME Council, may interlocking function din yan. So definitely they must discuss so that there is no replication, there is no, at hindi sila moving in separate directions, Your Honor. Because if they decide, if the Tatak Pinoy Council as well as the Innovation Council decides, hey, we'll pursue, let's say, for example, the semiconductors industry, then mas malakas yun kapag lahat ng ahensya na nando dun sa mga council na yun ay nagtutulak at lahat ng resources nila, nagde-devote sila ng resources to these agreed upon policy objectives. And you're right, I agree with you completely. Infinite po yung possibilities. But what is finite is our resources and our time, Mr. President. So definitely, with finite time and resources, we have to make difficult decisions, as many countries who have gone down this road before have done, in choosing, meaning, in a sense, which have a good possibility of being winners in the world economy. Yun talaga. Kailangan may standard ho tayo. We cannot be arbitrary in our selection. That is what some of our resource persons have said. The economists, the political economists who appeared in our hearing said, hindi tayo pwedeng, politika ang pagiging pamantayan natin dito. Kailangan may ebidensya na yung produkto na yon magkakaroon na sustained demand over time, and there is a great possibility that we can sustain the production. Because in the past, there have been raves about some of our products, but there's always been a challenge in scaling up production, which is why we need all hands on board, so to speak, Mr. President. It's not just, if we want to scale up coffee production or cacao production, it just can't be the DA. It has to be the DILG, the local governments, the incentives board. Talagang whole of government approach, as corny or as cliched that phrase may be, I think it is very appropriate use in this case, Mr. President.
This is envisioned to be the whole of government approach.
Yes, Mr. President, that Tatak Pinoy strategy. In fact, one of the possible amendments in our mind, because we're thinking, baka yung DTI as chair, baka hindi siya sundan ng mga ibang ahensya. So we're thinking of even making the executive secretary or the president the head of the council. Although there's the countervailing argument there is that minsan, sa dami ng trabaho nga, na-mention na ng ating majority leader, ng ating Senator Pia, na sa dami ng council sa gobyerno, many of our high officials are overburdened, just by attending. I mean, I think it was Vice President Duterte who said, the DepEd, I forget the exact number, 136 according to our Senate President Pro Temp. So just attending those would take up 1/3 of the year, Mr. President. And if you exclude weekends, kalahati na po ng taon yan. So that's just attending meetings. So,
Sige po.
you know.
Opo. Sige po. I think this will work even if it's headed by a secretary. I think, sige, they will respect each other naman at saka there is a law with an objective, the mechanism, so they will have to follow the law. What is important is that we have established that we must learn to prioritize, Mr. President, as stated by our sponsor, infinite ideas but finite time and resources as well as energy siguro. So we really have to know how to prioritize what we want to do or what we should do. And this will be evidence-based and then ilalabas sa organized meetings of and methodologies of the council. That is the concept I'm getting, Mr. Sponsor. I mean, do I finally get the idea behind the bill, Mr. President?
Yes, Your Honor, you're certainly on the right track. Absolutely, Mr. President, because yung statements mo na it's infinite, the possibilities are infinite, and the overlap your second statement about there being overlap. There's certainly an overlap, Your Honor. But I've been given a piece of paper that was from the DTI, where they say that it's necessary to have that council because existing councils are either stakeholder specific, for instance, the EDC for exporters, or that's the Export Development Council, or the SMEDC for MSMEs, or industry specific. So you have a Bamboo Development Council, you have a Creatives Council, you even have a Seed Council under the Department of Agriculture, or they are purpose specific. As we mentioned, we discussed the Innovation Council, there's a Council for Sustainable Development. So wala pong council na talagang nakatutok sa pagpapalago o pagpapaganda ng mga produktong Pilipino, Mr. President.
Yan pong next request ko actually, if we can get an inventory of all of these councils and then kami na rin po ang titingin kung talagang agree ba kami na this is stakeholder influence council and then isa is industry specific. Basta these are all the existing councils which can possibly have an overlapping mandate or function with the proposed Tatak Pinoy Council. Not necessarily 100% similar, but may kay sponsor ko to narinig merong Venn diagram overlap, Mr. President.
That's a very good way of putting it, Your Honor. We will provide, Mr. President, Your Honor.
Yes, so Mr. President. So, can we ito lang siguro, the most interesting concept actually is the economic complexity. Ano po bang ibig sabihin to? When I was listening to the sponsorship speech, nakita ko, for example, yung mga bansang oil lamang ang kanilang produkto or export, pero napakayamang bansa. Can we say that economy or that country is not an economically complex country, Mr. President?
Yes, Your Honor. In the abstract, we can say that. But in the actual, many of the oil-producing countries have already imbibed the concept of I'm not sure. I still have to do a survey of all the countries. Yeah. But countries like Saudi Arabia, which is one of the country's largest oil producers, has gone into petrochemicals because they realize they have the raw materials to produce greater value-added products. Country like Dubai, for instance, who's part of the Emirates, they decided to venture into tourism and other industries because they realized that their oil industries were drying up. So, karamihan ng mga resource-rich countries have also discovered na a path to greater prosperity is by pursuing that economic complexity path, Mr. President, Your Honor.
But in our definition, Mr. President, economic complexity refers to the measure of the productive capabilities and know-how of a specific geographical area, such as a country, region, province, city, or municipality, which is calculated based on the diversity of goods and services produced within and exported from that geographical area, and their ubiquity, which refers to the number of other geographical areas that are able to produce them.
That's correct. That's the correct definition under the
Yes,
definition of terms, Your
that's
Honor.
on page 4.
Yes, Your Honor.
Lines 7 to 12. Using this definition, given the diversity of goods and services or the products of the Philippines, are we an economically complex nation already, Mr. President?
30.
Or
We're number
country?
33 out of over about 150 countries being ranked under what the so-called ECI, or Economic Complexity Index, Your Honor. And the top 5...
The lower the number, the better?
The lower, yes, Your
Yeah,
Honor.
so we're number 33.
We're number 33,
Oh, that's,
yeah. And I'm just looking for that the page number of the index. The top 5, ranked 1 is Japan. Ranked 2 is Switzerland. 3rd is South Korea. 4th is Germany. 5th is Singapore. And of course, as I said in my sponsorship speech, I mentioned South Korea a lot, which is one of the great risers. From 20-something, they're now top 5, Your Honor, in the span of 2 decades, because they consciously pursued. They were already an emerging manufacturing hub with the likes of Samsung, Daewoo, LG, but they decided that they also wanted to pursue a soft, what some people would call a soft power strategy, meaning making Korean culture, food, and even beauty products ubiquitous, and which are some of the very high-value products. So talagang pinasukan po nila yun. And they even won an Oscar for a Korean film. They're winning, their bands appear on the cover of Time magazine. They sell out the biggest stadiums. Alam po ng majority leader yan, because I think he has to line up for his tickets when his children want to watch BTS or some of these world famous bands, Mr. President. Yeah.
Sige po, but ano tawag mo doon, the praises for the South Korean economy, I also heard when we were hearing the Creatives Industry Council bill na, Mr. President, kasi yung mga Oscars nga ganun. So, yun na nga, clearly concepts here are overlapping. Actually, in the bill, there is also the word creativity appearing in, I don't know if in one definition also, Mr. President. But,
We mentioned the creative.
so siguro, pagdating kasi sa creativity, ano rin eh, it's also as infinite as
Yes, Your Honor.
what we want to do.
You're absolutely correct.
So,
But in the bill, we specifically mentioned the bill used help shepherd the creatives industry law. Now we must defer to that council. I think I'm just looking for the page reference, Your Honor. Ibig sabihin, we don't need to reinvent the wheel when it comes to creatives, because that is our Bible or.
how will they interact, Mr. President? Let's say the bill becomes law, there's a Tatak Pinoy Council,
Yeah.
and we still have this Creatives Industry Development Council. How will they work
Pagdating sa
together?
creative industries, they must defer to the. We can put that in writing if you're not satisfied with the existing language, Mr. President. But they must defer because there is already a council there that has a head start in terms of, at least chronologically. So dapat sundan nila yung mga recommendations dahil marami na pong magagandang programa ang Creatives Council, and we have, in fact, through the tutelage or the guidance or initiative of our Senate President Pro Tem, the Philippines has had a greater presence in a lot of creative activities. Nabanggit po yung during yesterday's Department of Education, the National Book Development Board mentioned, the Philippines is the featured country in the Frankfurt Book Fair in 2025,
Correct,
Mr. President, so that we will have a higher profile in that part of Europe. And then yung participation po natin sa Venice Biennale, for instance, was helped initiated by Senator Legarda many years ago. So just an example, who's now our presiding officer.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Please go ahead, ma'am. Yeah. You want to add to that, yeah?
Thank you so much to the principal author and sponsor of the Tatak Pinoy, which we fully support. And thank you for mentioning two initiatives which we, as a Senate, as a body, had supported. And yes, the happy news is the Philippines will be the guest of honor in the 2025 Frankfurt Book Fair. It's called Frankfurter Buchmesse, and we're only the second ASEAN nation to be the featured country. If you visit the Frankfurt Book Fair, which occurs every year on the third week of October, you will see not just booths like an expo, but really the featured country has more than 2,300 square meters of a pavilion provided for by the Frankfurter Buchmesse. And not just that, we will have collateral events all over Germany. Maybe I'm revealing the plans too soon, possibly in Berlin and in Heidelberg, where Dr. Jose Rizal wrote A las Flores de Heidelberg by the Neckar River, and Rizal will be central to the Philippine participation. Probably I'm speaking too soon because this is still being thought of by our teams, but that's part of it. The Frankfurt Book Fair is what we call the Olympics of the publishing and the literary world. The intellectuals of Europe troop there, the publishers. This will really be a big boost to the Philippine publishing industry because they've been in the doldrums, we know that, because of social media, sinong bibili ng libro, among authors and writers and poets and the literary field. But I think they are enlivened, inspired by our participation. This is not merely a selection of the Philippines. We had to bid for it. And just so that you know, during the pandemic, what kept us busy was the bid book that we had prepared, not me personally, but a team that I had put together during the pandemic. Kala ko po, hindi na tayo mapapansin because there were changes also in their selection. They wanted Ukraine because of the war with Russia. But I guess persistence and patience pays off. And we were, it was announced last August, just last month, the CEO came to the Philippines and in Davao and inked the memorandum of agreement with a very small government agency, the National Book Development Board. But I'm sorry for my very long interjection. I thank the good sponsor for giving me the time to explain this. Thank you. And
Long
this
is
part of
relative,
Tatak Pinoy.
Madam President. So for you, that was a short one.
Yes.
I'm
This
just kidding. I'm just
but
kidding.
this is short compared to the SONA of the sponsor for Tatak Pinoy, which we fully agree with. Anyway, thank you so much for that. I'll stop
you.
now.
Thank you. Thank you very much to our
So
pro
that's
tem.
why we reiterate our request for the inventory of the council so that we can take a second look on how this Tatak Pinoy Council will interact with the existing council.
Certainly,
And
certainly.
if we have to make, if necessary, mentioned in the law, Mr. President.
Certainly,
So-
Your Honor, we will provide.
So maybe, Mr. President, ito na lang po talagang concept of economic complexity para po talagang maintindihan natin. So, ang purpose po ba natin, magkakaroon tayo ng Tatak Pinoy Council because consciously pag-uusapan ng council kung paano ang Pilipinas ay makakalikha o gawa ng mas so-called, ilagay ko sa quotation marks, complex goods and services na po ang ating mga produkto.
Yes, Mr. President. It's also, will coordinate. So we're firing on all fronts, so to speak. And hindi lang isang ahensya, kundi
council sila.
multiple agencies. And it's really so that philosophy of constantly improving and adding value and becoming more sophisticated becomes fully imbibed within our government. And even the private sector, Mr. President. Kasi council, ang comment nung PCCI, for instance, is let's have more private people there because it must be private sector driven, which I agree to a certain extent. That's why there are 4 private sector representatives in the council, Mr. President.
So, Mr. President, we are now actually encountering 2 terms, complexity and sophistication. Can these concepts be measured in such a way that the Tatak Pinoy Council will say na, we have made some achievements because the complexity level, when at the time we were formed, and then 2 years later, this is now the complexity level. Can this be scientifically or objectively measured, Mr. President?
I think so, Mr. President, but perhaps I don't think there's a single measure or indicator, but it can be measured by the increase perhaps in your exports. It can be measured by the value of the product you're exporting. So those would be indicators which tend to show a greater amount of complexity, Mr. President. And of course, and your ranking within the index itself is a measure of your aggregate complexity.
Okay, so that
Mr.
index,
President.
behind that index is a formula, Mr. President. So siguro, if we will be able to study that formula and understand it, yun, that's it. Because
Yes,
that's,
Mr. President.
that's how the world
We'll try to
understands
provide you.
what
Opo.
complexity is. Pero ang simple application po nito, pwede po ba na, for example, na manawagan tayo sa mining industry na hindi lamang or ang ating in-export, na dapat may additional something tayong ginagawa, processing or whatever you call it, Mr. President. Is that a possible
That is one
recommendation
possible.
of the Tatak Pinoy Council?
That's one possibility, Mr. President, given our substantial reserves of minerals. And it's something that Indonesia has proven
Correct.
During its the later years of President Yudhoyono and during the early term of President Widodo, where they really banned the export of minerals in the raw state, and they mandated the creation of processing plants in Indonesia. So there are many regions where, or at least two regions in Indonesia. Give me the mining figures, not the general figures. Indonesia, I think Sulawesi is one of them, where the incomes have gone up as a result, Mr. President. So hindi lang po yung may-ari nung planta, pero pati yung nagtatrabaho dun sa processing plant, yung mga minero, lahat sila ay benepisyaryo nung pagtaas nung binebentang produkto.
So yan ay isang posibleng rekomendasyon or output ng Tatak Pinoy Council. Na ngayon pa lang ay napag-isipan na natin. I mean, agree po tayo na kailangan natin gawin yan. Ngayon, let us say, isa yan sa recommendation ng Tatak Pinoy Council. Paano po nila mai-implement yan o mapapasunod po yung industriya?
That may require another, either a piece of policy or legislation, whether it's a law or a economic order, or executive order rather, Mr. President. I'm not too sure. We'll have to look into it more deeply. If an EO will suffice, if an EO would be sufficient in terms of its compulsoriness, Your Honor. And I have to look at how Indonesia did it. If they passed a law or the president just issued an order. But certainly something that would be compulsory in nature rather than simply speaking to the industry, because of course where there are profits to be made, then there will always be takers, Mr. President. Of course, also moving towards processing will require investments in capital equipment also, and may not be as easy as for us, it's just talking about it, but the actual on the ground is constructing factories and finding skilled workers who are suitable for the tasks that are required, Mr. President.
So thank you for that, Mr. President. And then how about when we say complex goods and services, are we also talking about the scientific content of the goods or the service, Mr. President?
Certainly, Mr. President. Professor Hausman of Harvard, who is the pioneer here in the work on economic complexity, points out the importance of R&D and science and technology, because the most complex good, I think, is an airplane. And then we know how that industry is highly competitive and driven by scientific development, meaning who can go faster, who can put more people on a plane, who can fly more economically, who can, And some experiments in this regard are not always successful. The Concorde, for instance, is no longer flying. But yet many millions or billions of dollars went into funding that kind of research, but it's no longer commercially viable. So now, there have been so many changes in aviation. Many of the successful companies of old that maybe we used to fly as young people. Pan Am no longer exist, and some have been merged, you know, and now it's dominated by the Middle Eastern companies and maybe those which are receiving help from the government, like Emirates, Singapore Airlines, etc. But the amount of back to your I digress, Mr. President. Back to your original point. Pagdating ho sa scientific, cell phones is another one. Television, personal computers, laptops, and tablets. These are highly complex goods which are driven by science. Everything Apple makes, for instance, is driven by science and design, Mr. President, which just goes to show some companies focused on the science but neglected design. That's why they were left behind in the race to the top.
Yung design siguro yun na yung sa creatives council. It's the science. And you cannot just will this, Mr. President. You cannot will it, WILL. Na we want to produce a cell phone or an airplane tomorrow or by next year. Hindi kakayanin yan.
Absolutely, Mr. President.
So what would be how will the plan look like, Mr. President? Will the Tatak Pinoy Council come up with a plan? Just like the Creatives Industry Council, there is a plan or a roadmap, and then what will it look like, Mr. President? Ano yan, a 20-year plan, 10-year plan?
There must be a short-term and a medium-term plan. The short-term covers the 1 to 3 years, and then the medium covers the 6 to 9 years, Mr. President, and long-term is beyond the 9 years. So that's what we call the TPS or the Tatak Pinoy strategy. That is the work product of the council, Mr. President.
Okay, so Mr. President, so I think I have been enlightened on what this bill is about, Mr. President, and just as the sponsorship speech already convinced me, I am more convinced now, Mr. President, of the need for this particular measure, Mr. President.
Well, I thank the sponsor for his. I thank the minority leader for his very kind words, and it means a lot. And definitely, we will furnish him the information on the council because he makes a very good point that we must, given the limited resources, we must focus and not replicate the good work already being done, especially by the Creatives Council, which you helped father into law, Mr. President. Thank you, distinguished minority leader.
Mr. President. Thank you to our sponsor. Congratulations also.
Thank you very much, distinguished minority leader. Thank you.
Madam President, may I ask for a minute suspension, Mr. President?
Session suspended.
Madam President, there being no other member who wishes to interpolate, I move to close the period of interpellations and debate. So move, Madam President.
The Tatak Pinoy interpellation has been terminated, yes. And it has already hurdled the period of interpellation.
And
no more.
debate.
Yeah.
Yes, Madam President. So move, Madam President. Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2426 under Committee Report number 107. So move, Madam President.
Any objections? Hearing none. So moved.
Madam President, Mr. Majority Leader, and distinguished minority leader and deputy minority leader, I just want to convey my immense thanks and the thanks of our team because your support means so much, and placing it on the agenda, I know there are so many important bills to tackle, and thank you for the support, Your Honors.
It deserves our support.
Considering the
Congratulations.
comprehensive sponsorship speech of our seatmate, friend, Senator Sani Angara. Madam President, with the consent of the body, I move to change the primary referral of the privileged speech of the Senate President, Senator Juan Miguel Zubiri, pertaining to the China Coast Guard water cannon attack on the Philippine Coast Guard and all the manifestations thereon delivered on August 7, 2023 from the Special Committee on Philippine Maritime and Admiralty Zones to the Committee on National Defense and Security, Peace, Unification, and Reconciliation. I so move, Madam President.
Any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved. So transferred.
Madam President, at this juncture, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, September 6, 2023. I so move, Madam President.
Any objection? There being none, session is adjourned until 3 p.m. tomorrow, Wednesday, September 6.